Okay, I might kick off in the interest of time. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and appreciate the early start. Um, Today we'll be focusing on our herbicide method, and how it can be effectively used to tackle one of Australia's most persistent and costly weeds, Lantana. Today is all about sharing knowledge and practical experience. We'll cover science behind method, and how it works in the landscape, and strategies that might help you get the best results for Lantana management. You'll hear some case studies, see some examples, and plenty of opportunities for questions. There's a chat function in Teams, so please feel free to use the chat function to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll address them at the end of the session. Your microphones have been disabled, so you won't be able to speak, but you will be able to type your questions into the chat function, so please do that. The aim is that hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be able to walk away with some confidence, and practical know-how on how to incorporate method into your own vegetation management programs. And hopefully workshop like this and other programs or workshops that we do run help to build some connections and some learnings from each other's experiences, as well as help you build up some knowledge about our product method herbicide as well. We've got some great speakers with us today. We have Kira O'Brien, who is our technical sales manager for at Envu here in Queensland. Kira has got a really strong technical background on method and woody weeds more generally, and we'll run through our product method for you. Christian Schobel is part of our R&D innovation team, and he is on assignment from our team in Germany. So thanks, Christian, for joining us here in Australia at the moment. Case Medlin, he is based in Texas in the US. Case has been working with method 240SL or aminocyclopyrrochlor, as you'll learn about, since it was, I guess, first brought to the market many years ago in the US. And so he's got some really good insights he's going to share. And Kyle Grant from 2K Pasture Management is also going to share some practical insights from his experience with using method in the field. So for those of you who I guess maybe not be 100% familiar with who Envu are, we've got we might be a new brand, but we have been around for many years. We have a history of about 50, our products and our people have a history of about 50 years. Previously, we were part of Bayer Crop Science as their environmental science division, and a couple of years ago we were divested to become a standalone business. There's over 1,000 staff across the globe working within Envu, and about 25% of those are in R&D. So we are committed to investing in bringing new products to market, particularly in this what we call range and pasture and industrial vegetation management. We've also got lawn, golf, ornamental business, mosquito management, forestry, and professional pest management range of products. So really positioning ourselves as, I guess, the environmental science organisation, an R&D organisation. We've got 4 innovation hubs across the globe, as you can see there, and present in 41 countries across the world. We've got a pipeline of new innovation coming through. This is some of them, but there are probably a few more here missing off this chart as well. So just wanted to, I guess, highlight that we are continuing to invest in bringing new molecules, new products to the market, new formulations, and investing back into finding solutions or credible solutions for your particularly for your industrial or vegetation management issues. So to start with, we're going to hear from Christian Schobel. He's going to talk about Lantana, biology, ecology, and the invasiveness of Lantana. So I'll hand it over to Christian. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie. So yeah, I want to start with basically an introduction of Lantana and getting everyone on the same page here. And as I know, a lot of you already have quite some experience with this plant, so I hope that brings everyone together and aligned. And yeah, Lantana is a perennial shrub reaching heights of about 2 meters. The root system is mostly shallow in the topsoil. It can spread quite a lot to the lateral sides, and there is one taproot that is going further down. Overall, around the world, there are about 150 different species of Lantana in the genus. But in Australia, we have two. We have Lantana camara, which is the biggest problem, and then also Lantana montevidensis, which is a creeping lantana. So basically a smaller plant, and you can distinguish both of them quite easily. As you know, there are different cultivars and hybrids with different colored flowers around. So there are variants with red, white, pink, and orange flowers. And after the pollination, these flowers turn darker. So basically, it's a biological sign to the pollinator that these plants have already been pollinated. And maybe to mention here as well that all these different kind of variants of plants, they have different degrees of how easy they are to be controlled. So the red variant, for example, is harder to control than compared to the white one. In Australia, Apis mellifera, the honeybee, is the main pollinator of Lantana camara, but in different other countries of the world, other animals are also doing this job. So, for example, in India, I think it's a different kind of butterflies, and in South America, it's a colibri, some kind of nectar birds as well. And the plant is able to spread quite intensively, and this is happening through birds, basically. So birds eat the fruits contain the seeds, and then after digesting these fruits and seeds in the bird drops the seeds in several locations, and this is a way of very successfully distributing these plants. And Stephanie, you can hop to the next one. Thank you. Basically, here is a map of the distribution of Lantana. And you can see in red all the different countries and areas where there is an infestation of Lantana camara. And originally, the plant was, its base or the native area is in South America. And it was brought via Dutch explorers to Europe as an ornamental and garden plant due to the nice colors of the flowers. And then in 1841, it was again through explorers brought to Australia with the same purpose as the nice ornamental flower it is. We have around the globe now about 50 countries that are infested with Lantana camara. So this is definitely a global problem. This is not just here in Australia. There are many countries that have these same issues, basically. And as you can see on the map for Australia, the distribution in Australia is mostly on the east coast, in Queensland, New South Wales, but there are also other smaller populations in Western Australia and other states. So it's definitely, widespread. But why is Lantana spreading so fast? And so the plant is able to survive in a large range of different climatic conditions. So basically, it's not very picky where it can live. It is resistant to different kind of stresses, so drought, humidity, heat, and salt. And so basically, there are many different areas where this plant is able to survive, and other plants are not. It is also relatively fire tolerant. And one of the main issues is the amount of seeds. So every plant can generate up to 12,000 different seeds per plant. And these are at least 4 years viable in the soil. So this means that if you're going to control one of these plants on your property, there is still a seed bank in the ground that is viable for many years. And so even after controlling one plant, you need to expect that at some point there might pop up another Lantana plant there just due to the seed bank in the soil. Besides that, the plant needs abundant light to grow. So this means that in thick forests, for example, Lantana is unlikely to infest because there is not enough light and place basically for the plant to grow. But if there is light or enough space, then it's growing very fast and outcompeting other plants. So for example, after a fire event where there is a lot of new areas for Lantana to infest, Lantana is definitely one of the main issues you will have, and it grows very quickly and outperforms other species. And the case that it's relatively fire tolerant means that after another fire event, you're probably not getting rid of Lantana at all, and you still have some root system which is healthy in the ground, and the plant can very easily resprout and regrow from these kind of roots in the ground. Let's look at the economic problems. And so we can definitely say that there is a widespread invasion of Lantana camara in Australia. There are statistics that over 5 million hectares are impacted across Queensland, New South Wales, the Northern Territory, and Western Australia. As you know, the plant is toxic to livestock, so it emits chemical compounds that cause photosensitivity, liver damage, and even death to the cattle. And this is the reason why you definitely don't want to have this plant on your property. And it also is able to reduce native vegetation. So if you have an infestation of Lantana, it's forming dense thickets if you basically not disturbing it. And these are reducing the natural biodiversity because other plants are not able to compete with Lantana. So these big thickets don't allow light to get to other plants. Lantana takes the water, the minerals from the soil, and these kind of things. And so basically outperforms the other plants that are growing around, not leaving enough space, basically. Also, the risk of fires. As we've learned, Lantana is drought resistant. So in the dry months, basically, there is a lot of dry biomass above the ground of all these dried out Lantana plants. They're not dead, they're just dried. And this, of course, is a fire hazard as well. Besides that, Lantana has allelopathic properties. So basically, it's actively inhibiting the growth of surrounding plants. Basically, Lantana emits chemicals in the ground that inhibit other seeds to grow and to germinate. And these are emitted by the roots. And this means as well that if you're having a control of the upper part of the plants, but still a more or less healthy root system in the ground, you will still have this inhibition of other plants due to this. So that's why it's very important to fully control these plants. And again, here to mention, we have a very resilient regrowth of this plant. So it's very tough to control it. And yeah, basically, if you have healthy roots in the ground, the plant will aggressively resprout from these roots and continue the infestations. Here, look at the different control methods. So since 1914, there have been made several attempts of finding a biological solution to control this plant. I'll just highlighted two here. So the Lantana leaf miner beetle, the Lantana lacebug. There are several others, but these are two of the most common ones. You can see in the top image, it's a small beetle, and the lower image it's a true bug. Unfortunately, overall, the success has not been very high or satisfactory with these kinds of solutions because there are so many different hybrids and cultivars out there of Lantana. And so basically, for example, the Lantana leaf miner beetle is mostly found on the red variants of Lantana, potentially doing more control there, but then the other variants are less controlled. And so unfortunately, this is not a complete solution, put it this way. Besides that, there are mechanical control solutions. The physical removal of plants by big machinery, for example. But you probably know all about this. Chemical control. So there are different active ingredients on the market, like ACP and method, and then also triclopyr, picloram, and aminopyrrolate. You can apply via foliar spray, via a splatter gun. Depending on the size of the plants and how many stems there are, you could even do some kind of a basal bark or stem injection. But yeah, it depends on how many stems there are, if it makes sense or not. There have been some reports regarding resistance issues, I think especially with triclopyr and aminopyrrolate, that there have been cases where these active ingredients were not able to control these plants or do any kind of efficacy. So yeah, there are definitely reports about this. And just to mention here as well, resprouting and regeneration. So the plant is quite aggressively. It's difficult to control it, and if you're not achieving a full control of the plant, you will definitely find resprouting and regeneration on your land. And just to highlight here as well that basically all of these methods here have their place on a farm. So it's not like one solution would fit all. There are different situations on your properties and on your farms where all these kind of tools will fit in the toolbox, and there are many different ways how you can control Lantana. So just to give an overview here, and maybe just to add regarding the chemical control, which is I think important as well, that using chemicals to control these plants causes stress to Lantana camara, and in case they put sugar into the leaves, which makes it more attractive to the cattle. And as the plant is toxic, we definitely don't want the cattle to be more attracted to these kind of plants. So when you do chemical control, make sure that the cattle is far away, or at least not in the reach of the plants, so to avoid any kind of issues in this regard. And yeah, with this was my last slide. Yeah, thank you very much. If you have any kind of questions, just put it in the chat. And with this, I head it back to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Next up, we have Kira, who is going to talk about Lantana control using method 240SL herbicide. Thanks, Kira.
Thank you, Stephanie, and also thanks, Chris, for providing a little bit of a background on Lantana. So today my presentation will mainly focus on how method fits into Lantana control, and also a bit of an introduction about the herbicide itself. And then I think Case towards the end will also go into a little bit more detail about aminocyclopyrachlor, which is the active ingredient of method, in a little bit more detail. So to start off with a little bit about method. So method 240SL herbicide is a soluble concentrate that is mixed in water and applied through gram-based methods for the control of problematic broadleaf, brush, and woody weed species for pastoral lands, native conservation areas, and industrial sites. This is all covered on our label as well. So method is introducing an entirely new active into the Australian market called aminocyclopyrachlor, which we can just abbreviate to ACP for simplicity because it's a little bit of a mouthful. But essentially ACP is from a novel subclass of chemistry within the family of group 4 synthetic auxin herbicides, and this subclass is called the pyrimidine carboxylates. And so most, or I should say all group 4 herbicides mimic this natural phytohormone called auxin. Its systematic name is, I think, indole-3 acetic acid. And essentially what happens is that when this synthetic auxin is applied, the plant essentially thinks that they're being flooded with auxin. And this essentially triggers uncontrolled growth signals within the plant. Think of it sort of as the plant is receiving way too many growth instructions at once. And this then leads to things like twisting of the stem, stems and of the leaf, swelling, and the plant eventually shuts down. The most critical component to this particular type of response is the abnormal growth of vascular tissue, because this causes disruptions in both the movement of water and nutrients throughout the plant in the xylem and the phloem. And when this happens, it then obviously leads to plant death through things like draining energy from the plant and eventual desiccation. So most group 4s that are historically on the market come from chemical subclasses like the phenoxy herbicides. That would be 2,4-D, for example. There's benzoic acids, which would be things like dicamba, and also pyridine carboxylic acids, which would be the likes of triclopyr and picloram. So unlike some of those older synthetic auxin compounds, ACP comes from this new subclass, as I mentioned, and this gives it quite unique binding properties and mobility and efficacy within the target plant. And because of this chemistry, it does also move more efficiently inside of the plant and works on weeds such as Lantana that can often shrug off some of those older actives because they're starting to develop a certain level of resistance. Another important key thing to mention about method is the fact that it is an unscheduled formulation. It has a very low odor profile, which I know for a lot of landholders and applicators, this is a problem with other herbicides where they get headaches and things like that. And also method has compatibility with methylated seed oil, which some of you may know as like hasten oil, for example, or another non-ionic surfactants in placement of diesel, which also gives it an advantage over the likes of things like access herbicide. So I just included a little bit of an image here. This is the, I guess, how the Herbicide Resistance Action Committee, or HRAC, categorize their herbicides. And to the right there, that's specifically the group 4 herbicides, so the auxin mimickers. And while obviously all the ones here are synthetic auxins, you can see that at the bottom that I've highlighted in the red, that white group, that's where ACP falls within its separate chemical family. So most people, as I said, will be familiar with those phenoxy acids like 2,4-D that's on that red panel along the left there, and things like the pyridine carboxylic acids like picloram, which is in the green, and then ACP is in a completely different subclass there at the bottom, highlighted in white. And this newer chemistry is why we are seeing, I guess, a different spectrum of activity with ACP versus some of these other synthetic auxin herbicides, and also a stronger performance on many woody weeds. So we see things like a higher level of potency. So we're getting much higher sensitivity in a lot of these targets, particularly woody weeds, at much lower rates compared to some of those older active ingredients. We're also seeing a broader activity on woody weeds as well. So it's more effective on tougher to control plants, particularly like Lantana. It can, in some cases, be slower active, but it's also highly systemic. So it moves very readily throughout both the xylem and the phloem to actively growing regions of the plants. So this includes the root system and also up into the shoot tips where it's actively growing. I know that for some actives, it does need a little bit of an assistance moving throughout the plant, whereas ACP is quite systemic within itself. And then also ACP has a slightly different binding profile. So it still works via auxin receptor mimicry, similar to those other actives there, but it's the pyrimidine structure which allows unique interactions within the plant, giving it activity on weeds where they're, I guess, typically less affected by other synthetic auxins, especially as herbicide resistance is becoming a bit of an issue. You can scan the QR code there, which will take you to the HRAC website where you can have a look at this in a little bit more detail. So one thing that I did want to share was to talk a little bit about herbicide innovation over time. So this timeline is sort of showing the history of herbicide development over the past 60 or so years. And you'll see that from the sort of early 1950s through to the 1980s, new chemistries were being released quite regularly, often just a few years apart. And as we move into more recent times, as we stretch sort of into the 80s, you can see that there are now massive gaps between new active ingredients. And this is reflecting an increasing challenge to bring new modes of action to the market, especially as time is passing, this is becoming less available. So what's important here is that despite this significant slowdown in herbicide innovation and development, Envu has led the way with the release and development of the two most recent actives that are available on the market, which would be indaziflam, which is the main active ingredient of one of our pre-emergent herbicides under the name of Esplanade, and then also minocyclopyrachlor ACP, which is the active ingredient of Method. So this just sort of reinforces, I guess, our position as global leaders in innovation, and is also demonstrating our commitment to delivering new solutions in a market and a space where very few others are currently succeeding. So a little bit about Method's applications and what's sort of covered within the label. So Method is registered for various application types. So firstly, broadcast application in bare ground situations, such as railways, roadsides, and utility sites. This would be at a rate of 500 mils to 1.3 litres per hectare, and with a 1% methylated seed oil or 0.25% of another non-ionic surfactant like Weta 1000, BS 1000, Weta 600, those sorts of products. We do also have individual plant treatment registrations. So for foliar spraying, our current rate range is between 200 mils to 500 mils per 100 litres of water. And once again, this is tank mixed with either 1% methylated seed oil or 0.25% of another non-ionic surfactant. The specific rate that you would use is very much dependent on the woody weed. As you'll see as I go further through this presentation with Lantana, Method works at very, very low use rates, which is fantastic. And this is the sort of technical advice that either your agent or one of our sales teams can help you with if you've got a specific question about a particular weed. For basal barking and cut stumping, we do have a rate range of 5 litres to 10 litres per 100 litres of water. And this is with a 10% mix with methylated seed oil. And this is really important to use a methylated seed oil because we're not mixing it with diesel. We need to make sure that we're getting that sufficient wrap around the plant. And so it's important to have the methylated seed oil in there to assist with that wrap and also penetration through the bark tissue. And then we also do have registration for stem injection, and the rate for that is 0.5 millimeters, and that's undiluted, so not with any sort of adjuvant or surfactant per cut. And each cut should be made about every 5 centimeters at diameter at breast height. And so I also just wanted to share that although Lantana is the primary focus of today's session, Method does have quite a broad applicability across many problematic broadleaf brush and woody weeds. I have included some here on the slide for you. This is not the entire list of what we have currently on our label. It's just some of the key ones that I guess the sales team are asked about quite often, and I've highlighted probably the ones where we have the most space in at the moment. So things like acacia, eucalyptus, lantana, obviously, mesquite, prickly acacia. And then in terms of broadleaf weeds, things like fireweed, flax fleabane, and also asparagus fern. And so with this broad applicability, it is a very versatile tool for woody weed management in that both councils and landholders won't have to necessarily switch between different products when treating different weeds at the same time or wanting to use different application methods. And the fact that this product is so systemic and has residual activity makes it particularly suitable for weeds that have very deep root systems or a very high regenerative or resprouting capacity, so things like lantana. The list that we currently have of on-label species also continues to expand as part of an ongoing trial program that we have. And so at the moment we have Christian, who just spoke before me, here from Germany, and he's here and in his role as solutions development to spear a lot of the label extension work that we're doing. We're constantly taking on board customer feedback to improve our label, and also hoping to obtain some minor use permits in the future for some other key targets that also are currently not on label. Could you just switch to the next slide, Stephanie? Thank you. So I just wanted to share, rather than going through a lot of different graphs, I just wanted to share some photographs of results that we've been seeing out in the field. So this is a demonstration trial that I have located in Cabra, just outside of Rockhampton, which is assessing the efficacy of method at two different rates. So our lower label rate, which is 200 mils per 100 litres of water, versus our higher label rate, which is 500 mils per 100 litres of water. And we're using different adjuvants to assess whether or not this is a critical factor with method's performance on Lantana. And so obviously the first adjuvant that we looked at was Hasten, which is a methylated seed oil. As you can see, so we've done a 0-week, 5-week and 16-week assessment at the moment. This is a replicated trial, but I'm just showing you photos of one or two plants just as sort of a representation. But we haven't at the high rate or the low rate seen any significant differences in the efficacy of the product with Hasten. And this is a really critical factor that we're seeing in our own trial work, but also from our customers' experiences as well, that method is highly effective at very low rates, so that lower label rate of 200 mils per 100 litres of water. And at this stage, at 16 weeks, we're obviously not seeing any sort of reshooting or resprouting at this stage in the trial. If you could just go to the next slide, Stephanie. Then one of the other adjuvants that we looked at was Pulse, which is an, I guess, an organosilicon-based sort of surfactant, which has quite unique properties compared to MSO. So it was important for us to have a look at this one as well. Once again, there was no significant differences at our last assessment at 16 weeks between the plants that were treated at the lower label rate of 200 mils versus the higher label rate of 500 mils per 100 litres of water. And then if you could just move to the next one again, Steph. And then the last adjuvant that we looked at was BS 1000, which is a biodegradable spray additive that contains 100% non-ionic surfactants. And once again, we compared that at both rates. Didn't see any differences between the lower label rate versus the higher label rate. And if anything, if you were looking for very subtle differences in, I guess, how the plants responded to the different treatments, I would have said that this particular treatment with the BS 1000 was the most effective. In saying that, all of them have been deemed dead at this stage in the trial, regardless of the adjuvant or the rate that we used. There's not that much significant difference. But if you were looking for sort of subtle differences, it would mainly be in the way that the leaf browning and defoliation occurred. And then if you could move to the next one again, please. Thank you. And I also just wanted to share some photographs from one of our early adopters who's actually also located not far from Rockhampton in Bejewel. So he discovered method, I think it was in December of 2023. He was doing a bit of a late night internet search to have a look if there was any sort of new products available on the market for Lantana control, because he was really struggling in this space with resistance and performance issues with other products. And he came across a paper that was released in the US with the University of Florida, which I will show you guys in a few slides later, that mentioned the active aminocyclopyraclorin in this paper. It was concluded that it was the by far significantly the best active for Lantana in the States. And so he instantly went onto Google to find out where he could source this product in Australia. Envu came up and Method came up in his Google search, and I'm pretty sure he bought it that following week and was spraying it out straight away. So I just wanted to share some of his photographs, because ultimately, as much as our trial work is important, it's also important for you to see the on-ground success that our own customers are having with this product as well. So in the top photograph there, that is a picture that was taken, I think, around June of this year. And this was 18 months after treatment with Method herbicide. He'd sprayed this back in December of 2023, versus at the bottom in the same month, he sprayed a plot with Grazon plus metsulfuromethyl. And this photograph was also taken around June of this year, 18 months after treatment. You can see that the stuff that was sprayed with with Grazon and metsulfuromethyl has sprouted back. All the foliage is sort of returned. It still is a little bit sparse, but I'm sure by now, or at least going into spring when there's a bit of rainfall and the weather's starting to get a bit warmer, it'll probably be 100% foliation at that stage. Whereas the stuff with Method, it's looking like a bit of a skeleton ground of Lantana. So that's a really great comparison between the two products. The other thing to note when comparing it as well, because Method, especially when you're foliar applying it for things like Lantana, is often compared to the likes of Grazon or Grazon Extra. And there definitely are some comparisons, but also some significant differences between the two products. The first one being the use rate. So typically with Grazon, depending on the size of the plant, we mostly recommend rates of 500 mils to 750 mils per 100 litres of water, versus with Method, we're seeing, close to 100% efficacy at 200 mils per 100 litres of water. So that's a significantly lower use rate compared to Grazon. The other thing is as well is that with Grazon, I know that a lot of people report that they have to be very, very liberal in their coverage of the product, in that obviously with Method, you still have to get, full sufficient coverage and wet as many leaves as you can. But with Grazon, I know that you also have to be wetting the stems and making sure that it's actually dripping through the canopy and you've really got that liberal coverage onto the plant. Whereas with Method, if you actually read our label, it does say that you need to have sufficient coverage, and that is an important factor, but you don't want it to the point of runoff. And so when you hear Kyle's presentation a little bit later on today, he'll probably mention the fact that he's using a lot less volume of solution per plant on Lantana with Method versus with some of those other actives like Grazon as well. So that was just another comparison that I wanted to make. You can move to the next slide, please, Stephanie. Thank you. And then this was another photograph taken by that same landholder. This is Lantana that's been sprayed with Method. I believe this particular photograph was taken at the end of last year, so it's a little bit of an older one. So it's probably closer to about 12 months after treatment. But you can see of those ones that have been sprayed, there's no resprouting, no foliar on any of those plants there. And he's had really successful control of those treated plants. And then the next one, please, Stephanie. And then once again, another example of where Method has been used, a little bit of a thicker patch there compared to some of the other photographs that I shared with you, and having really good success. I think once again, this is a slightly older photo taken in December of last year, but just to give you another example of the sort of success that we're having with the product on Lantana. And then the next one, please, Stephanie. Thank you. This is the paper that I was talking about that was released by the University of Florida in the States, that this particular landholder came across in December of 2023. So this particular paper was published to compare boom spray application of fluroxypyr, aminopyralid, and aminocyclopyrachlor, or ACP. And the results showed that neither 1 or 2 applications of aminopyralid was effective. So I think regardless of whether they did a single or 2 applications, there was less than 20% control achieved 12 months after treatment in this particular trial. A single application of fluroxypyr 12 months after treatment resulted in about 12% control, but with 2 applications of fluroxypyr, they were able to achieve closer to 80% control 12 months after treatment. Whereas with ACP, for example, they were receiving 98% control of Lantana with just 1 application with ACP at 12 months after treatment. And with 2 successive applications, they were getting 100% control. So this is a significantly better result with ACP versus with fluroxypyr and aminopyralid. And I think those were some of the actives as well that Christian sort of outlined we're starting to see some resistance issues with. And like I said, this is at significantly lower use rates as well. What I did just want to mention is that this is a paper that's been released in the US. Boom spraying is obviously an off-label usage here at the moment in Australia, but it's more so just to give you an indication of the research that is out there when comparing it and benchmarking it against other products. This particular landholder had read this product and wanted to replicate a similar sort of trial at his property to see if he could get similar results. He did boomless spraying versus boom spraying, but they're the photographs there on the left, 12 months after treatment, doing that trial on his property. And yeah, got very similar to results as what was reported in that particular paper. But this is mainly just for demonstration purposes and to show you that some of the research and the literature that's out there currently on the internet. One thing that I did want to mention is that we do have a short stewardship module that is available for Method. It is a compulsory component for resellers to do this module, but it's optional for councils, landholders, and contractors. We do highly recommend that you still complete it though, because it does cover some topics in relation to things like, the safe and effective use of the product, ESIs, withholding periods, treatment setback distances, susceptible plant species, and things like that. It's quite a quick and user-friendly module. It takes probably about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on if you're taking notes. And it's just part of Envu's commitment to responsible stewardship and also ensuring sustainable weed management. And you will receive a certificate upon completion of this module as well. And you can access it either online via our website, or you can scan the QR code here on the screen and it'll take you to that webpage as well, where you can complete the stewardship training. And just to go into some of the, I guess, sort of key things to cover in terms of stewardship on the product, all of this is covered on the label as well if you don't complete the stewardship training. And it's also important before you use the product to make sure that you're reading the label and using it within the guidelines and frameworks of our label. So Method has a nil withholding period. It has an export slaughter interval of 12 days. You shouldn't use any manure from cattle that have been in paddocks treated with Method for things like use on susceptible crops or using it as mulch or compost. The only thing that I will say is that the animal's manure is no longer subject to these, I guess, restrictions once it's been grazed on untreated land for 3 days. So that is also another option. That's just important because the active can be excreted through both the feces and the urine of the animal. And it's also important not to apply or allow spray drift to potentially sensitive vegetation or crops. So if you read our label or complete the stewardship module, it does outline a treatment setback distance of 2.5 times the canopy drip line width of adjacent non-target vegetation. So it's important to make sure that if you are spraying with Method, that you're just mindful of surrounding native vegetation and making sure that you're adhering to that treatment setback distance. And then just as a little bit of a summary overall, why to choose Method for Lantana control. So firstly, as we mentioned, it is a new class of chemistry that is delivering extended control at much lower use rates compared to other products available on the market, and also much fewer applications, as you would have seen, supported by that paper from the University of Florida. And it's reducing the need for retreatment and the associated labor, product, and operational costs that are associated with that. It is, as I mentioned, a highly systemic product in that it moves upwards and downwards throughout the vascular system, so in the phloem and the xylem, to reach all growing points of the plant, so up through to the shoot tips and down into the root system to ensure complete and lasting control. And we're seeing significantly less regeneration and regrowth with Method because of this compared to other products currently available on the market. It also provides extended soil residual activity, suppressing regrowth and seedling emergence for months after application. Another reason is obviously due to the flexibility in terms of its application, and also the weeds that are also currently on label. So it's suitable for basal bark, cut stumping, stem injection, and foliar treatment, as I spoke about earlier. And also due to the ergonomic benefits of the product for the landholder or the applicator, due to its unscheduled formulation, odorless properties, and compatibility with methylated seed oil or other non-ionic surfactants in placement of diesel. And then the only other thing that I did want to mention before we move on to the next presenter is that we will be doing a similar workshop on our pre-emergent herbicide Esplanade. As I mentioned, that has the active ingredient indaziflam, which is also one of the newer ones that's been released onto the market. We'll be having an online workshop on this particular product as well in mid-October, so in a couple of months' time. We haven't released registrations for this one yet, but we will be circulating these in the next couple of weeks. We'll have one for Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria-based customers on the 15th of October, and then another one the following day for those customers that are in Western Australia, South Australia, and the Northern Territory. So definitely come along to that session as well if you're interested in this particular product. It's primarily used in industrial sites like roadsides, railway, utility sites, but can also be used along the likes of farm fence lines, and also in forestry situations as well. Perfect. And then I don't know, Stephanie, if you wanted to go through some of the questions now, or if you wanted to leave it to the portion at the end. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe you can address a couple there. There's a question there from George around MSO versus non-ionic. You did cover a little bit of it after he did put that question, but can you see that one?
So would it be better with MSO than non-ionic? I think that is largely species dependent. So with Lantana, we're not really seeing any significant differences between, I guess, an MSO versus a non-ionic adjuvant. I think that's partly due to the fact that Lantana is just so susceptible to the active that it doesn't need too much assistance getting into the plant and circulating throughout the plant. Maybe with some other weeds, that is a different case. So we do have, as part of my role in technical services, I'll be doing some other trials towards the end of this year and also next year, looking at whether or not adjuvant is a critical factor on other targets as well. But definitely in the case of Lantana, based on the trial work that we have done and also the sort of anecdotal evidence that we've received from our customers, I would say that it's not a critical factor, at least in the case of Lantana control. The other question was from Stacey saying, hi, will this have any effect on Chiny apple? So Chiny apple, this is actually the woody weeds that I did my PhD on. So I have a very special place in my heart for this one. But with Chiny apple, it is part of our label extension program that Christian is doing at the moment. And so this is one that we have done quite a bit of trial work on already and still have some upcoming trial work. So we're actually going out to spray some field trials, I think early October of this year. I can't report at this stage on whether or not it's effective, just because it is off-label and I don't want to encourage anybody to do off-label usage. But we are seeing promising results, and pending the outcome of these other trials that we'll be doing in October, this is potentially one that would end up on our label as part of our label extension program. And then, is there any work being done to register it for aerial drones? Also, another good question. It's probably one of our most commonly asked questions that we receive. As a sales team, we are aware that there's a massive market and demand for aerial application, particularly with Lantana, because it's often found in areas that are hard to access, like hillsides and things like that. It is definitely something that we have been exploring and liaising with the APVMA on, in terms of what trial work we have to do in order to fulfill requirements for that sort of registration, and also talking with customers and agents and that sort of thing to gain their insights into what we should be doing in this particular space. So I think it's definitely something that's gaining a lot of traction we're looking into. And I'm not sure if Christian has anything else to add on this, whether or not it's moved through other stages of governance internally within our company, or if it's still just an idea that we're floating around at the moment.
No, thanks, Kira. So yeah, in general, yeah, we are looking into it. I cannot give you much details at this stage, but we are definitely aware of these wishes for aerial application. And I would be very interested to further discuss with you what your use case would be and what your specific needs for this would be. So I don't know, in general, if you want to reach out, you can potentially give me your email address and I can reach out to you. But I think as well at the end of the presentation, my email address and telephone number will there on the slide somewhere. So you can also, if you're not comfortable with sharing your information in this forum, you can also just give me a call or send me an email, and then I'm very happy to schedule a meeting with you and we can further discuss this and yeah, basically your situation on this. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so definitely reach out to him if you wanted to have a bit of a chat with him about some of your feedback on the product or opportunities that you see. We're continually taking on board your feedback and your comments to improve the product and make sure that it is covering all of your needs in terms of spraying both broadleaf and woody weed species. And then the last question we have from George is, has there been any work on Lantana? Yes, this is also part of our current trial program that we've been doing. So we have some trials out actually in Rockhampton, which once again have shown a lot of really exciting promise, which we're really happy about. And we've primarily been doing basal barking in our trial work, and that's because we've also been working with the University of Queensland. They have a PhD student whose project is solely focused on Lantana, and part of his project is to compare method with several other actives available on the market. So I think he's compared it to, I think, about 7 or 8 different products to look at efficacy across various different factors. So whether or not season is an important factor when we're looking at control and things like that. So we definitely have some foliar trial data and also basal bark trial data. Obviously, I can't disclose I guess, what that looks like at this stage, but I can tell you that it's promising, and depending on how that trial work goes, it could be one that ends up on our label soon as well. Are there any other questions? If you do think of something in the meantime between now and the end of the presentations, we can have like a Q&A portion at the end as well where we can cover some of those other questions. So yeah, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Kira. That was great. Thank you. Now, next up, we have got Kyle Grant from 2K Pasture Management. Kyle is a client of ours, and Kyle has used quite a bit of method over the last 12 months, and he's going to give us some of his insights into his experience with using method. Thanks, Kyle.
Beautiful. Thanks, Steph. Hi, guys. I'm Kyle Grant. So I'm the Managing Director of 2K Pasture Management. We're predominantly a vegetation management and research and development company. Most of our work is split evenly between private landowners and commercial local government agency contracts. So I would say Lantana control is basically our bread and butter. We've been using method as a control mechanism for about 12 months now. I first become aware of the product, sort of similar to the story Kira told earlier on, through some late night Google searching, and I found a different paper out of the US comparing different products over there. Did a reverse search, found the active ingredient was registered in Australia, and got in touch with one of the sales reps from Envu. He had a meeting with us, we had a good chat about it, and we ended up purchasing some product as part of the early adopter program. So based on our early experiences with that product, we've now gone to using method exclusively as our primary means of Lantana control. Can we go to the next slide, Seth? Beautiful. So me on the left, our 2 little offsiders, integral part of the company, and then my wife, who's our senior scientist and research and development coordinator. She's also the brains behind the operation. I just manage all the day-to-day stuff. Next one. Beautiful. So one of our largest contractors is actually in forestry management, specifically pole properties. So as part of that, we provide the vegetation management component of a silvicultural management program for Energy Queensland. They own roughly 12,000 hectares of land in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. Pretty much most of those properties are fairly extensively invested with Lantana. So we manage 2 of those properties, one here in the Lockyer Valley and one down in northern New South Wales. And I would say the majority of the work that we're doing with those guys is Lantana control and opportunistic silvicultural treatments of eucalyptus species and some other forestry weeds. As I mentioned earlier on, we also do research and development. So we've got a few ongoing trials at the moment. I won't get too much into them. One of the cornerstones of what we actually try and provide is integrated weed management strategies rather than just baseline spray contracting. So as part of that, we lean heavily on selective herbicides. Being that Method is a selective herbicide, it's become the cornerstone of our approach. So we try and leverage selective herbicides as well as suppression through competition to get viable species and desirable species growing up in place of these areas where we're treating. Next one, Steph. Beautiful. So we use both Esplanade and Method. Predominantly, we use Method for our woody weed control, and then fence line control, areas, rights of way, industrial areas. We found Esplanade to be quite revolutionary as well. Basically, anywhere where we would be providing a glyphosate treatment outside of in-crop use, we would be also tank mixing with Esplanade now as well. With Method, we are now, every time I give this speech, it changes, but I think we're now up to about 560,000 litres of solution that we've applied of this product in the last 12 months, predominantly on Lantana, but like, as I mentioned earlier on, a lot of forestry weeds, eucalyptus, things like that too. Next one, Steph. Beautiful, every day. So here we've got some different control comparisons. So this photograph on the right-hand side is actually on our own farm. We've got a 200-acre farm just south of Gatton area. We have been experimenting with all sorts of different applications using Method, so different label rates, different adjuvants. We've settled on a rate that works really well for us in an adjuvant, and based off all of those initial trials, we stick predominantly with a Weta 600, so a simple non-ionic surfactant. In all of the areas that we've sprayed, we're yet to have any significant regrowth. I think I've found 3 plants over all of the sites that we've sprayed in the last 12 months that I've audited recently. I've found 3 plants that were regrowing that would have been 100% down to an application error. The product's performance has just been revolutionary. I've never had control over Lantana like what we're getting with Method. Next one, Steph. So these are photos of a couple of different trials. So separate to what Envu does, my wife has got some independent research trials just comparing different herbicide efficacies. These photos are of very low dose methods. So we're testing it down to rates as low as 25 mil, just to compare different efficacy and see if we can get different stress responses out of the plants and everything. So these were some of our low rate trials. As you can see, it's still super effective at that rate. For us, that gives us more confidence using Method at those label rates and at those lower label rates. We're finding that we don't need to go anything above 200 mil. 200 mil is our top end label rate for Lantana control. This is an example of some of the forestry that we treat. So you can see the density of the vegetation. This isn't just 1 or 2 stems. We're dealing with thousands and thousands of plants per hectare. One of our major concerns within forestry was obviously we didn't want off-target kills, which has historically been the problem with grazon, especially when we're getting into areas of density like these 2 examples here. With grazon, I would expect that we would, given the wet season that we had last year especially, we would have 100% got a lot of flashback events, just because that weather was so unpredictable and some of those soil profiles we're working in and the density of the desirable vegetation, I could not have guaranteed that we could have performed those sorts of treatments that we did, and within our management plan effectively and safely. One of the things that we've noticed with Method is that when we go these lower label rates, and even below the label rates, what I'm finding is that we're not getting any off-target kills. So in the, as you can see, the density of the lantana that's in these areas here, it would be impossible to not spray around the dripline canopy of some of these trees. Now, we've been monitoring, I keep a personal eye on all of these trees because the last thing we want to be doing is killing trees in a forestry. But of all of the spraying that we've done out in that forestry alone, which would be in the vicinity of 450,000 litres on that one site, we haven't had a single off-target kill event out there. We have not killed one single mature tree. One of the other things I wanted to touch on is the senescence of the plant post-application is quite different to what I would normally see with Grazon. So a lot of the time, and especially during the winter season, so we're still spraying Lantana at the moment, which is just unheard of. Granted, we've had a very abnormal season, but all that I'm seeing is that it takes a little bit longer to kill, especially compared to Grazon. So we're getting a lot longer death, but we're getting complete control, where with Grazon we'd be getting 80 to 85% control. So it'll sit like this on that 6-day post-treatment. It'll sit like that for Lantana for probably about the next 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, within the space of about 5 to 6 days, it will completely defoliate. Next one, Steph. Yeah, so here's an example of what I just mentioned. So within, what have we got there? 8 to 14 days. So within those 6 days period, we've got almost complete defoliation, where you'll look at it and it looks like it's hanging on and hanging on, and maybe you're a little concerned it hasn't rolled it, and then all of a sudden it'll fall off a cliff. Next one, Steph. Beautiful. So here's some of the rates that we've compared. So everything that we do as far as government is done on a per hectare basis. So we have a set schedule of rates, and within that, I have to try and make our treatment options work within that set schedule. I can't. There's no. I can't add a variability to it or anything like that, or a variable. So our average output, it varies a little bit, but we're roughly putting out 950 litres per hectare. That is probably about 60% of what we would be putting out if we were using a Grazon equivalent. Kira mentioned earlier on, one of the questions I get asked all the time is, when we're using method, how do we actually apply it? So most of our spray equipment is high volume commercial equipment, so quick spray or quick spray equivalent, different brands and that we run. We run them, probably our most used units are out of a 2,000 litre truck mount units. And those things are absolute weapons. So we're putting roughly 4,000 litres per day out of those units. Now, in that application, we're spraying to complete coverage, but not to run off like we would have to with Grazon. So because of that, that's where I'm pulling this 60% coverage figure out from. I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate. It's just a ballpark, just a guesstimation, but we're using a lot less total solution, which I think is also helping us with our off-target, our lack of off-target effects as well. Next one, Steph. So we've really tried to push the limits of this product. So what predominantly started out as a Lantana control program, we slowly shifted, just leveraging and playing around with this product's performance. We managed to shift this into a silvicultural treatment program. So instead of just spraying Lantana, you can see the size of some of these saplings now that we're spraying adjacent to the areas where we're conducting noxious weed control. Because of that, we've been able to basically change all of our SOPs within silvicultural forestry practice, or within these native forestry practices, where this would have had to, we would either have to go through and do a mechanical treatment program following the noxious weed control program, or we would have to do a chemical thinning, so stem injection, tordening, things like that. Now we're able to actually conduct our thinning operations at the same time using that high volume treatment. And as you can see with the density of those surrounding saplings, we're still not incurring off-target impacts when we're using this as a high volume treatment, even on trees up to 4 or 5 meters. Now that wouldn't be standard practice. This one was sprayed as a bit of an example. But yeah, it's completely changed. The versatility of the product's completely changed how we're going about our day-to-day operations. Traditionally with Grazon, we would see, like I said, roughly 80 to 85% control, unless you were able to get complete and utter saturation around the stems and base of the plant, in which case the amount of off-target damage that we were incurring would have been unfeasible in a forestry situation. We have also tested glyphosate treatments out in this forestry just while we're trying to develop best practice. This forestry in particular, where a lot of these photos come from, it's a very unique ecosystem out there. It's technically a dry land, but it's really a wetland forestry, and density of vegetation in there is just unheard of. Because everything's on that set scheduled rates, historically it's made treatments and control programs in there economically unviable. Method has completely changed that. So with Method, we've had in that forestry specifically, we've had complete control, 100% control of every bit of lantana that's been sprayed and every eucalyptus. The acacia species I find aren't quite as susceptible as the eucalypt species. You still get complete control, but you have to be a little bit more careful about ensuring thorough coverage. But the lantana, you point a spray gun in its general direction and it gives up the ghost. Next one, Steph. So here's a treatment comparison for some of our different treatments that we've trialled, both commercially and on private landowners' places. As you can see, it's quite comparable at those lower rate levels to Grazon at 200 mil per 100. However, with complete control, we're not having to go back through and do follow-up spray treatments either. So where we would traditionally have to budget for all of these things, we would have to account for it, or we would have to have a conversation with the landowner of either the fact that we're risking off-target damage or we're possibly going to incur some follow-up treatments as well. Now we're able to provide a one treatment solution for a lot of these problems. The big one that I wanted to point out is this Weta 600. So being able to get away from a pulse penetrant or any kind of organosilicon adjuvant has really reduced the cost of what we do. I always insist that our crews run it with a marker dye. I know we'll often bounce up against opposition for that, but in my experience, you're far better off, even with the cost of the marker dye, adding it in just to ensure that you're getting that thorough coverage. We do always tank mix Method with met sulfur and methyl at about a rate of around about 15 grams per 100 litres. Now, I say that that's a little bit of insurance. The Lantana control programs, they don't need it. We're getting 100% control even without any adjuvant, with just straight Method. It's that potent for Lantana. But what we did find is when we removed met sulfur and methyl from our tank mixes, there was a range of other incidental species that we were spraying as targets of opportunity that all of a sudden we weren't maybe getting complete control over. So while they weren't deliberately targeted, it was beneficial that we were treating them as well. It wasn't expected within the contract, but it was beneficial. So based off that and the relative cost of met sulfur and methyl, we added it back in. Grass regrowth. So one of the interesting things that we've been finding, so in some of the earlier treatment sites 12 months ago, the grass regrowth underneath the old lantana canopy, we've got grass that's 5-6 foot tall, green panic and Rhodes grass growing up through these old lantana canopies. It's an interesting thought that I've just been playing around with for the last 6 months, and I'm still not entirely sure where I fall on this, but as far as leaving dead standing lantana, I actually think that there's an inherent benefit to spraying first in these moderate areas, light to moderate areas of lantana density, spraying first, allowing it to die back, especially where you've got steeper inclines, any country that's got an erosion potential. That root system of that dead and decaying lantana is going to hold firm some of that soil. And what seems to happen, because lantana itself, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but is approximately about 24% protein. So there's a heavy nitrogen component to it. So once it is dying, and because it has those alleliopathic properties while it's alive, once you get complete senescence, that canopy or the canopy line sitting underneath that lantana, it's basically getting a kickstarter for any grass seed that can get its way in there. You're going to get rapid grass growth, which is going to help with erosion control, but also it's going to help with suppression through competition. As Christian mentioned earlier on, it's quite a prolific seeder and it's viable for quite a long period of time. So if we can get grass growth coming back in its place, it does not like being shaded. So if we can get complete coverage, we'll get another 50% on top of any of our initial chemical controls just through suppression. We are finding, just on that one, sorry, Steph, I mentioned that we're still spraying in the middle of winter at the moment. Now, granted, this is a very atypical season, so we're still having high daytime temperatures. The soil temp hasn't dropped all that much. and we're still getting follow-up rainfall like I've never seen through winter. So based off that, we made the decision commercially to keep spraying Lantana through these periods. Obviously, we avoided areas that were heavily stressed or any plants that showed really serious signs of stress. But anything that was just a little bit unhealthy, we started testing, just dipping our toes in the water initially. What we've found is that this product seems to or appears to remain incredibly active within the stems and leaves of these plants for quite a period of time. So while the plant might not be growing as vigorously as what you would like, it's still there's still a translocation of this herbicide that's occurring. So it takes a lot longer. We're seeing periods of up to like 9 or 10 weeks to get complete control, but we're still achieving complete control with our standard rates. It's completely changed how we're approaching Lantana. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to be a consistent theme right throughout every year, but through this year alone, it's meant that we've had a good 12 months of continuous treatments. The other thing that we've noticed as well is we're getting rapid stem breakdown. So the stems of these plants themselves are actually breaking apart during that senescence. And I do wonder as well if this is going to increase the rate of natural decay. So instead of having to worry about mechanical removal, I'm quite comfortable just letting these plants rot and break down, knowing that potentially that's going to happen in a shorter period of time than what I would typically expect. Done, Steph? Beautiful. Thanks for that, guys.
No, thank you, Kyle. Great to get some insights from somebody who has actually got hands-on experience using method so extensively. So appreciate your time today. Next up, we have Case Medlin. Case is part of the Envu Technical Services team in Texas, in the US. We had the privilege of Case's company in Australia just a couple of months ago. He was over for the Rangelands Conference that was in Adelaide, the International Rangelands Conference, and then spent some time visiting our clients with our team in New South Wales in the Central West, and then in Queensland. Went to the Richmond Field Days, spent some time in Townsville and around there looking at different woody weeds and getting to know the Australian market. So, Case, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yes, I did get to see a lawnmower race, and I'm in the process of building one myself there at the field day. So that was awesome. But Steph, thanks. Kyle, that was I'd really like to pick your brain on several of those topics there, particularly around the grass release, because I see that all the time and I can't explain it. It's remarkable how much grass is released after a application of ACP in a lot of cases. So that was news to my ears right there. But no, Stephanie and Kira wanted me to talk a little bit about some of the history around ACP, kind of. And certainly we can't do that in 15 short minutes, but we can kind of scratch the surface at least and kind of show you a little bit of the work that we've got going on here in the U.S. and some of our markets. The bulk of this presentation is going to be around the range and pasture market. However, certainly we have a lot of ACP applied in the IVM market as well, but the range and pasture market is where I typically kind of reside. Going to be in basically three major segments here to kind of give you a background of the range market, the brush market, if you will, here, particularly in the state of Texas. That's been really our key focal point for the last 5 years, I guess, since we got a product labeled there with ACP in it. We'll talk a little bit about that, the species, the past products used, kind of the results there, the impacts, and certainly the increased infestations that we still see up until recently, at least, across the state. Our brush infestation is just growing. Talk a little bit about aminocyclopyrachlor or method. Our method is your method, so there's not a play on trade names there. It's one and the same product, ACP at a 240 SL. A little bit about the background, key learnings, and application methods. We do have the opportunity, particularly on range and pasture, to actually put ACP out broadcast right now. And as alluded to a little bit ago, hopefully y'all will get there very soon. A lot of it has to do with our I guess, infestations and how we tackle the problem here in a lot of cases. that is one that we've relied on heavily with aerial applications of Envora on rangeland, which is a third point there. I look at it more as a range restoration tool than I do a weed control or brush control tool today. Basically because I'm going to show you just a few pictures, not many, but a few pictures of one location that was basically 10 years after treatment, after a trial went out. That's the point that we're trying to get some of our customers here to understand is this is a long-term game that we're playing on in the brush market. But the next slide kind of give you a little bit about the background of what we're fighting. At the bottom of that, I should have started there. We've got a significant amount of brush problem just in the state of Texas, and is ever increasing. We in Texas certainly were spraying back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, dumping chemistry on brush, trying to control it. But the problem just keeps growing. The last statistic that I saw, and I don't know how reliable this was, but it was in the mid 50s as far as 1 million hectares that needed to be treated. But anyway, so we've got a problem that's basically out of hand and it's growing. Now then, we didn't start treating rangeland brush with ACP until 2020, I guess is when we got our Envora label there. But basically, most of those species are legumes. And I know one of the questions earlier was asked around a legume. One thing about ACP is if it's a legume and you don't want to kill it, better not spray it with ACP because it's probably going to treat it kind of poorly. But anyway, that's just some of the species that we're battling. Several different acacia species scattered across the state, including Weesach, which is y'all's mimosa bush. And I know Yuri and Ed and others, Kira, showed me a lot of prickly acacia that we went and saw. And that is that's definitely a problem that y'all have there. I don't envy y'all one bit about that one. But there are new chemistries that have a good job of controlling it. So the next slide, we have the same problems as far as what's going on. Well, the brush is taking soil water, surface water. We basically turn our landscape into a monoculture of mesquite or a monoculture of Weesach. I was amazed by the amount of grass that I was able to see on my trip over there. So that was really a sight for sore eyes. Certainly a hit on forage production, biodiversity, and wildlife habitat. That's what a lot of the reasons that we're spraying for these days. We went down the mechanical control route. It's very costly, short treatment life, things such as that. And you also disturb so much wildlife habitat that a lot of people pull back from that. Chemical control measures, we can go back to the days of 2,4,5-T back in the 70s, that a ton of that was sprayed. And then progress forward to the clopyralids, striclopyrs, and things like that, basically just low mortality. The brush would grow back. The same plants would actually grow back. And that's one thing that I've learned about ACP is the mortality is better. So you don't have that brush regrowth. Now then, you do have to contend with, there's always new seeds being brought in, livestock, wildlife, wind, whatever it may be bringing in new seeds. So you have to contend with that aspect of it. But the next slide. Not going to go a whole lot over a lot of the mode of action and things like that. Kira handled that perfectly. She's had herbicide physiology certainly since I have. But one thing that I will kind of highlight on, at one time when we were just developing ACP, it was the only pyrimidine carboxylic acid that was actually on the market or coming to the market. So it was unique in that aspect. And all of those persistent auxin type products in these different families, they all behave a little bit differently in the plant. And this one was certainly unique, and you can see it from the early days of development. And the next slide is one that I actually found. I had heard this statistic for a long time, but I never knew where it came from. I finally found the source of it. The early researchers of ACP, back when it was basically in the lab or in the greenhouse, they did a ton of testing, and it was really impressive to see that some of their take-home points, It's 20 times more potent than 2,4-D. That's the word that they used. 8 times more potent than dicamba and 4 times more potent than picloram. Don't get too hung up about that, because if you look at the amount of active ingredient per acre that would be, or hectare that would be put on a property of either of those 3 products right there, ACP is much less than that. So a lot of that effectiveness, if you will, has already been reduced by us reducing the rate. We don't have to go out with that much. And I think I highlight that on the next slide, maybe. Some of the, I guess, benefits of ACP and kind of where it shines. Kira mentioned, and Christian as well, it is a post-emergence herbicide, but the 3rd bullet point, it does have soil residual activity. So you get the dual effect of that, but it does go out at a much lower use rate. The other thing, and Kyle kind of got into that, is the tank mix flexibility of ACP. I'm glad to see y'all are already playing around and using the MSM in with ACP, because that is a good tank mix partner that I see, particularly for broadleaf weed control, herbaceous weeds, things such as that. The next slide. The won't go into a lot of the species, but I believe when Method came to the market here in the States, if I'm not mistaken, there were 23 different species on that label, brush species labeled. And I know I started digging into some of the odor chemistries and looking at the number of brush species or woody species on those labels, and it wasn't near that. So at the launch here in the States, or shortly thereafter, we had close to 24 species of woody plants. And then the next slide kind of showcases some of the weed species that are more problematic type species. We don't have a lot of Lantana here in Texas. I know down in Florida and in certain places in South Texas, we run into Lantana, but we certainly don't have the populations like y'all have there. But there are a host of species that herbaceous weeds that we can target with ACP applications. There was a ton of work early on, exactly, how can we use this product? And I know there was a question around broadcast applications, and I know on Rangeland today, you don't have that option. However, hopefully you'll get that soon. That is one thing that we do rely heavily on, is the aerial application portion of the label, because it's almost a 1-2 punch. I never say that you're going to get 100% control. I've never seen 100% control on some of these brushy or woody species that we spray. I think it's impractical to think that you're going to get 100% control on some of these more difficult to control woody species. That is where that IPT, that individual plant treatment, comes into play, because you're never going to be a one and done when it comes to a brush control treatment. There's always going to be that need to clean up something, or if you have some new plants invade, or something like that. So we do have it labeled for foliar, basal, cut stump, and hack and squirt, certainly in the IVM market, with Method 240 SL there. The product that I'm going to wrap things up with just a couple of few slides here is around Envora. Now, don't let the name scare you or anything like that. This is basically a pre-blend or a pre-mix of aminocyclopyrrochlor and triclopyramine. So it's 2 amine formulated products. You'll see that your 240 SL is basically a 2 pound per gallon, is how we refer to it, a 2 pound per gallon formulation, where Envora is actually a 0.67 or a 2/3 pound per gallon formulation. But it also has 1.33 pounds of triclopyramine in there with it. So it ends up being a 2 pound per gallon product. It's just a lightweight ACP formulation, if you will. And this is the product that we've basically positioned into the range and pasture market for a couple of reasons. But I will say right now that I'm envious of y'all having Method in your range and pasture market today, because the flexibility of what you can do with it. The triclopyr is going to come with Envora, regardless of what we say or do. But with method, you can tank mix your MSM, your triclopyr, whatever you may warrant. And that's what we see actually in our IVM market is people actually tank mixing the method 240SL with a triclopyr and basically forming Envora because it is kind of a unique blend. So this slide is one that I took the center two pictures there in 2017, 10 years after application. The outside pictures were actually taken 1 year after treatment. So basically, this was a trial up in north central Texas where we were actually comparing what would become Envora one day. At that time, we didn't know what the name was going to be, but what would become Envora, and put it side by side with the commercial standard of the day, and that was a clopyralid triclopyr tank mix, which is what was the go-to products at that time. You can see at 10 years after application in the Envora treated plot there, you basically have the same 13.5 or whatever that boom was. It was a weird size that ran that 300 foot through that plot, where by 10 years after the commercial standard, it had grown back. A lot of that brush had resprouted from the base. Didn't kill a lot of those plants. In other words, those are not new seedlings. Those are actually trees that actually came back to life after a couple of years of being defoliated with the standard. And that's one thing I think takes us into the next slide. So what we at the time, we would always take 2-year mortality data. That was kind of the go-to way of comparing treatments at the time, was looking at 2-year apparent mortality. And we've got those data. I don't get hung up on those data too much because 2 years is not the mark that I shoot for, because we know that Envora's or ACP is so much better long-term than that. But basically, you can see where we compared to the two different standard treatments, Reclaim and Remedy, which was basically a clopyralid triclopyr mix. And then on the right side, we compared to Sendero, which is a heavy load of triclopyr with aminopyralid. We have good mortality at 2 years. Then I think hopefully the next slide gets into kind of the longer term look. And this is after we had trials in the field for 10 years. The oldest one was actually 10 years old. It was easy to see that there was something different at 10 years than what we were seeing at 2 years. And the difference was a lot of the standard treatments were actually growing back. And we had been told that by a lot of landowners. So this was our opportunity to actually go in and capture some data from these trials that had not been mowed, had not been resprayed, had not been manipulated in any way following that treatment that we had or the trial that we had established. So we went back in and actually collected canopy cover. It's basically impossible to collect mortality data 10 years after because most of the stems are gone, the trees are gone. You either have grass or you got green stems. So it's impossible to collect the mortality data at 10 years after. So, but we could collect canopy cover and then tie that back into some of the university data to kind of understand a little better. And basically, the rule of thumb here in the States, or in Texas at least, is with Weesach or mimosa bush, which is a prolific invader in our world, a 30% threshold or above, and you basically lose grass production. You lose it rapidly. So we wanted to see what the treatment life of Envora was compared to some of these industry standards. And basically the industry standard had a treatment life of 3.1 years. And those ranchers that I was visiting with, they basically told me before we had this data in hand, they told me that you have got to be back on those properties that you start treating every 3 to 4 years, or you basically lose production. They're gone. And that matched up perfectly with what they were saying. With old chemistries, they were having to spray every 3 to 4 years. But if you drop down and look at that blue line and the blue data points, you can see that we're keeping that canopy well below that treatment life threshold, if you will, out 6, 8, 10 years. We don't really know what the treatment life is going to be. Yes, I can extrapolate out and get there, but it's gonna come back to management and how that property is managed. Going back to one of the things that Kyle hit on, and is around, and Christian maybe, with around managing that vegetation and making sure that we have some competition out there competing with those seedlings that are trying to germinate. And that's the other thing, is we typically don't see seedlings come into these plots until somewhere between 4 and 6 years. Usually it's 5 and 7, but somewhere in that time frame is when you'll start seeing some of these seedling mesquite or seedling weesach, seedling invasive legumes, if you will, start coming back in. And I believe that speaks to the residual activity of ACP. It doesn't take much of this to kill a seedling legume. So the next slide kind of shows our mesquite data that we collected along the same lines. The industry standard have a treatment life threshold of around 8.6 years, 8.5 years. Ours is much longer than that. Don't really know what it's going to be, but right now we're looking at 15 plus years anyway, is where I would easily say that our treatment life is going in our mesquite setting, which is further north and further west in the state. Typically don't get as much rainfall as we do in the weesach country down south. But the one thing that I want to hit on, and the next two slides kind of follow up on, is what do we see long term? Often we focus on trying to kill a tree, trying to kill brush. I realize that is a lot of people's goals, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is restore a lot of our rangeland back to some of the beautiful country I saw all over in Australia, back to grassland. But it's not just grassland. A healthy rangeland is going to have some of these other species in it. And that's the fun thing now, is watching some of these desirable plants, desirable herbaceous, often we call them weeds, but they're forbs, come back in. Some of the desirable legumes that actually benefit that landscape. So it's nice to see some of those plants start creeping back in. I think the next slide, I tracked one location out to 9 years, and we're getting more legumes coming in there by 9 years after. The Lespedizas, the vetches, and things like that. So it's interesting to see how that land is kind of healing itself. Yes, there's a lot of grass on these properties, but it's also a mix of a lot of different beneficial plants that we're getting back out there. So that's kind of the message I want to deliver, and I think I'm done.
Thank you, Case. Appreciate your insights. Interesting to see the long-term results that you are getting, and the restoration of the lands over there, having had method or ACP on the market for a little longer than what we have here in Australia. So we've got a few things to look forward to here. Just a reminder on our Esplanade online workshops, we will share those details with you when they become available for registration if you're interested in those. And that's all we've got time for today. I'm just conscious of the time. If anyone has any questions, please pop them in the chat, and we will hang on and get back to you. Just quickly for your information, the sales team, Ed, Kira and Odin and Tim in Queensland and New South Wales. And then we have Kevin, who looks after basically the whole of Australia from an online customer sales perspective. And then, of course, Christian, who you heard from. So contact details there. I'll send them through in the follow-up email after this. And we'll also have the recording of this available on our website in the next, hopefully, 24 hours. And so if you've got any colleagues or anyone who missed the workshop, please feel free to direct them to our website to have a look at this recording. Any other questions? There's nothing in the chat at this stage. Appreciate everyone's participation, our presenters. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you in the field or online again sometime in the near future. Thanks, guys.